Welcome to Athenaze, Chapter 7 Alpha, in which we talk about reflexive pronouns. First question, what is a reflexive pronoun? A reflexive pronoun is a pronoun later in the sentence, so maybe the direct object, the indirect object, or the object of a preposition that refers back to the same person as the subject. So in English, we designate it with the suffix self, as in myself, herself, himself, ourselves, themselves, etc. In Greek, you put a prefix before some version of auton. Recall that auton is the masculine accusative. There are different forms for the feminine and the neuter. We're using the accusative because by definition the reflexive does not exist in the nominative. So me plus auton, masculine accusative singular, is myself, but you can only use this when referring to men. Referring to women, you have to use mεαυτεν, the feminine version. Se auton, yourself, again, that's just masculine, and haauton, himself, just masculine. So now let's look in more detail at the forms themselves. So there's no nominative form because this pronoun refers back to the subject, so it cannot be the subject. So we're going to look at just the genitive, dative, and accusative, singular and plural. So as I mentioned, you start with some version of auton. So here I've given you the masculine singular in genitive, dative, and accusative. And then you add the prefix me to get myself. So this is mεαυτου, of myself, mεαυτό, to myself, and mεαυτόν, myself. Recall you can only use those forms when talking about men. When talking about women, you have to start with the feminine version of autes, and then you add the prefix me. And in English, they have the exact same translations because in English, we don't differentiate between men and women when saying myself. For the second person, again, we're going to start with our base forms of auton, add se to get of yourself to yourself and yourself. And then if we're talking about women, we start with autes, add the prefix se, and again, the English translations of the masculine or the feminine will be the same. But in Greek, you need to make sure whether you're talking about a masculine person, then you use the masculine forms, and a female, you use the feminine forms. The plural is formed a little differently. You take the actual first-person pronoun, hemon, hemin, hemas, and then add as a separate word the declined version of auton. For men, it'll be declined in the masculine, so auton, autois, and autus. So this is of ourselves, to ourselves, and ourselves. For women, again, we'll start with the first person plural pronoun, us, of us, to us, and us. Then we'll add the feminine declined versions of auton, so auton, autais, autas. Likewise, with the singulars, we will translate them the same for either masculine or feminine because in English, when we say our, we're not differentiating between men and women. For the second person, again, we're going to take those same forms of auton, and as you might guess, instead of starting with the first person pronoun, we'll start with the second person pronoun, humon auton, of yourselves. If you're talking about, well, the male and female are the same, but let's look at the dative, to yourselves. Talking about men, it's humin autois. Talking about women, it's humin autais. Just a little FYI, gnothi se auton. Gnothi is an imperative. It's a kind we haven't learned yet. And then sa auton is the reflexive pronoun yourself. In olden times, it would be thyself, so know thyself. Last up, let's look at the reflexive pronouns in the third person. Still, there is no nominative, so we're going to look at genitive, dative, and accusative only, masculine, feminine, and neuter. We're going to take the version of auton and decline it for masculine, feminine, and neuter. And then we're going to add to all of them the prefix he. There you go, he. And then these translate, the masculine are all going to be some kind of himself. So of himself, etc. Feminine, of herself. Neuter, of itself. Dative, to himself, herself, itself. Accusative, himself, herself, itself. And then in the plural in English, we do not distinguish between masculine, feminine, and neuter. So all of these will be of themselves for the genitive, to themselves for the dative, or themselves for the accusative. Thanks for joining me, and I'll see you in Chapter 7 Beta.